Hurricane Katrina brought chaos, fear, and obstacles that until 2005 seemed unimaginable in American City.
And 10 years later, Jeremy Campbell got a chance to speak with New Orleans natives now living right here in Atlanta about what they went through just to survive.
Atlanta is safe from the kind of devastation that threatens coastal cities. But the decades-old memories are here of a wounded city, losing friends, homes, and for a time, themselves. These Georgians were New Orleanians 10 years ago.
It was waking up the day after the storm on my daughter's 5th birthday.
The day the levees failed.
And seeing water everywhere your eyes could take you. And thinking, oh my God, what has happened?
Time stood still in New Orleans.
But it was just so hurtful to see all those babies and all those senior citizens outside of the convention center.
These people are being forced to live like animals.
The city that care forgot felt forgotten.
We have no water. You could have dropped it from the sky from them helicopters.
I just need you to tell me how the hell to get out of here.
And I hear the stories from some of my friends that were in the dome, that were getting pushed around and kicked around, and it was bad.
They called us refugees. I don't think these people really understood what the word refugee meant. We more survivors.
To survive, they had to escape.
A place that was home.
Chanel Lee found her way, waist deep in the murky, warm water.
You know, here it is, my daughter's 5th birthday. She can't swim. So my son, who's 14, puts her on his neck, and we walk 8 blocks in water and get on top of the I-10 bridge. I just spent the night on the interstate with my mother and our kids. There's just hundreds of people.
To survive, they had to go.
And I wasn't gonna leave, I wasn't gonna leave.
Until the city of New Orleans closed its border for a month.
Katrina happened to everybody. Katrina just didn't hit one population of people. And I think that was the misconception, is that the people who were impacted by Katrina were all poor, they were uneducated, they were riddled with crime, but that wasn't it. We were people.
Survivors of a city watermarked.
This chapter of my life is truly closed.
Katrina damaged more than 1 million houses across the Gulf Coast. The damage cost more than $135 billion.
More than 500,000 people were displaced and families were divided. This map right here that you see to our right, made by our media partner USA Today, shows where they went. Houston and Atlanta took in the largest numbers of evacuees. And our Jeremy Campbell measured the impact they have had on Georgia.
How do you measure the impact of Hurricane Katrina on a city where it never made landfall? First, in years.
It doesn't seem like a whole 10 years.
Next, in population. 100,000 people transplanted to Atlanta from New Orleans in 2005. But some went back.
I say all of the time that there's no place like home. We've been blessed in the city of Atlanta and in our region to host about 70,000 people.
100,000 became 70,000 in 2006. After that, it's anyone's guess. FEMA stopped tracking transplants. Eventually, New Orleanians became Georgians on census forms, but a home address doesn't always equal home.
I'm a New Orleanian at heart. I just live in Atlanta.
You'll find a lot of those who stayed in Atlanta together at church.
We were scattered in 32 different states.
The Atlanta branch of Changing a Generation Full Gospel Baptist Church formed in the months after Katrina.
I see people who are better. Sometimes you have to go through some experiences in your life to make you better.
There are other ways to measure Katrina's impact on Atlanta. We can look at what some thought would happen after the looting, the violence, and the despair.
It bothered me when we were called refugees. I actually had to go and pull out the Webster Dictionary and see what the definition of a refugee was. And the definition of a refugee is someone who flees their country. We did not flee our country. We live in America, and our city got flooded out.
And we heard the possibility that crime was going to tick up.
According to Atlanta police, in that year, 2005, there were some upticks. But much like the population numbers, pinning that exact spike on Katrina transplants is difficult.
I cannot directly contest or even direct any of the crimes and increases to anyone from New Orleans.
With them came New Orleans culture and families and new businesses. Two cities sharing a spirit, city to city, mayor to mayor.
We have an authentic relationship.
We're joined at the hip. This city.
It's just based upon shared experiences.
Sure.
And sharing determination from 10 years together.
Felt right, so, I stayed.
I'm Jeremy Campbell. 10 years ago, I was a New Orleanian who evacuated to Atlanta. And at that time, I expected to move back to Louisiana, but Katrina changed everything for everyone. The lesson learned about change, however, is it's not always bad. In the mass exodus from New Orleans,
Ending up in Atlanta was happenstance.
Mark Forche somehow merged into the lane toward Atlanta with no roadmap to what would happen next. That lane change led him to Blacktop Barbershop. He owns it.
Most of the time we just work.
Just a dream in New Orleans. In Georgia, it's his reality after Katrina's winds of change pushed him eastward.
You had to embrace the change. And most of the people who have embraced the change haven't gone back. I feel that when they went all these other places, Georgia, Texas, places like this, they saw things that we didn't have in New Orleans. And one of the main things that they saw were people living their dreams at the working class level, economically and financially.
Along came Katrina, a blessing in disguise.
Normika Forrest evacuated to Atlanta at the last minute.
Let me pack some clothes for me and my kids, and let me get out of here.
And later that night, her first night in Georgia, she decided to stay.
And it was the best move I could have made. I enrolled in school, got my associate's degree.
Now Normika works for the state. She's raising two boys on her own, confident, hopeful, determined in a way she never felt living in low-income housing 10 years ago.
I didn't have any goals. When I came here, it's a lot of people my age that's educated, that's in college, or they have degrees with good jobs. You don't see too much of that back home.
Back home, she remembers crime and gunshots. Katrina exposed the vulnerability of life in its poor neighborhoods.
I actually lost my little brother to crime in the streets of New Orleans. He was gunned down.
Chad Forrest died well after Katrina, as violence in a storm-wounded city flooded New Orleans. At age 31, he was shot and killed on the street.
I did fear it. I mean, it's just a life. I grew up there, and I know, it's extra hard for a young black male in the city of New Orleans.
If people want to come home, we want to welcome them back.
New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu knows to compete with cities like Atlanta, the perception of New Orleans must change.
We have been really working hard on making sure that we connect, particularly young men who for some reason may have dropped out of school.
But with all the challenges, there's also progress. And that is the contradiction that is New Orleans, even for those who stayed in Georgia.
I'm like, call me Peaches, Georgia Peach, just call me Peaches. But I feel like I'm a New Orleanian living in Atlanta.
There's always a bit of home left behind. Forche preserves it, hosting barbecues and brass bands and something else.
We have a baby, and this is my daughter. This is a Katrina baby right here. She's the blessing, the gift that was given to me while being cursed at the same time, looking at all this water, not knowing if I've lost everything.
His daughter turns 10 a few weeks after Katrina, and she represents this unique population of New Orleanian Atlantans. She's born into opportunity and grounded in the identity of a city that holds on to its spirit, even after historic winds of change.
Oh, I'm a New Orleanian. I'm a New Orleanian.
So much tragedy to talk about, but thank God for all the goodness that came out of that there. In a moment, Brenda Wood's last word, but first, we ask you to check out more of our coverage of Katrina.